Staff Sergeant Billy Foster's railgun turrets spit death at the incoming Brunali dropships as he prepared to single-handedly face the alien invasion force descending on Outpost Zulu. Proximity alarms wailed and ground-penetrating sensors pinged hundreds of large contacts. 6 Brunali capital ships and dozens of assault landers had jumped from FTL and were launching a massive offensive to seize this uninhabited but strategically critical world. Their goal was clear: crush all resistance, establish a forward operating base, and stage for an all-out attack on Earth itself. But the Brunali hadn't counted on Billy Foster. The grizzled space marine was Outpost Zulu's sole defender, left behind to watch this remote outpost while the fleet was deployed elsewhere. He was outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Any other soldier would have despaired at such odds. But Billy had faced down plenty of alien threats in his decorated career. He was one of the USSF's finest, a cunning warrior, an indomitable survivor, humanity's best hope. The Brunali were fearsome conquerors, physically imposing and technologically advanced, with reverse-engineered precursor tech that outclassed humanity's in many respects. The reptilian warmongers had enslaved a dozen species in their relentless expansion. To them, humans were just another primitive race to be crushed and subjugated. Their arrogant commander had no idea what he was up against in Billy Foster. But Billy knew this terrain like the back of his hand. Outpost Zulu was equipped with an arsenal of cutting-edge weapons and an experimental BattleNet AI. Donning his combat exoskeleton, Billy checked his rifle, sidearm, and bandolier of plasma grenades. Missiles stood primed in their tubes as the first alien landers streaked into the atmosphere, their hulls glowing from re-entry. Humanity's survival hinged on what happened here in the next few hours. One man against an empire. Outpost Zulu had to hold until the Earth fleet arrived. Billy steadied himself as the enemy ships descended through the clouds. He would stop this invasion, or die trying. Billy's fighter streaked away from the Brunali fleet, afterburners flaring. His sensors showed a single ship detach from the alien formation and surge after him. It had to be Orin, the arrogant Brunali commander, taking Billy's bait. The chase led them into the system's asteroid belt. Billy juked and jinked, narrowly avoiding the tumbling space rocks. Orin matched him move for move, his ship's cannons spitting bursts of searing plasma. Chunks of blasted asteroids spun away as the duel intensified. Both vessels were soon pockmarked with glancing hits. Alarms wailed in Billy's cockpit, but he bared his teeth in a savage grin. This was what he lived for. He goaded Orin over the comms. "Not bad for a scaly freak, but you're going to have to do better than that." Orin's reply crackled with rage. "I'll flay you alive, primate. Your head will decorate my bridge." The running fight took them to the system's fringes where a massive black hole lurked. Billy dove toward the dark maw, threading between gravitationally distorted light beams. Orin hounded him, eating up the distance. At the last second, Billy wrenched into a slingshot orbit. The black hole's immense gravity hurled him away at breakneck speed. Orin tried to follow, confident his ship was the faster. But Billy's parting gift changed that. The instant Orin hit the point of no return, Billy remotely triggered the EMP charge he'd planted on the alien's hull hours before. Orin's systems crackled and died as the pulse fried his circuits. Engines sputtering out, the Brunali ship coasted right across the event horizon. The black hole swallowed it whole. "Billy, help me!" Orin's frantic pleas erupted over the comm. Billy's reply was glacial, "No." He cut the channel just as Orin's scream Dopplered into oblivion. On board the invasion fleet, consoles lit up with failure warnings as the capital ships fell victim to Billy's digital attack. Reactors ruptured, venting fire and debris. Escape pods shot from disintegrating hulls. It was a slaughter. Brunali troops on the surface fared no better. As Billy's program seized control of their ship's weapons, artillery and missiles rained from the sky. The aliens were bombarded with their own ordnance, blasted into craters as they ran. Only when the Brunali force lay in utter ruin did Billy contact the cavalry. USSF ships soon arrived to mop up stragglers and occupy the outpost. Billy didn't smile as he watched the cleanup from the command center. The butcher's bill had been high, even if it was all on the Brunali side. Yet he'd stopped an invasion in its tracks. The cost had been worth it. It had to be. He imagined a few trillion humans back on Earth sleeping a bit sounder tonight. That knowledge would comfort him during the nightmares to come. Billy basked in the glory of his victory for a few fleeting days. Parades were held in his honor. Medals were pinned to his chest by the top brass. Flashbulbs popped as he shook hands with the president herself. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed humanity was ascendant, the Brunali threat vanquished. That brief respite was shattered when urgent reports flooded in from the border systems. Long-range scans showed immense Brunali fleets mustering just outside UEC space, their numbers far exceeding pre-invasion projections. A sickening realization dawned on humanity's leaders. The assault on Outpost Zulu had been just the opening skirmish. The real invasion was only beginning. Fear and panic gripped the populace as the prospect of an overwhelming Brunali reprisal loomed. Some military advisors urged the immediate evacuation of frontier colonies, sacrificing millions to buy time for the inner worlds to muster their defenses. Billy would have none of it. In a fierce strategy session with the Joint Chiefs, he smacked his fist on the table. We don't give 1 inch of human territory to those scaly bastards. Not 1 goddamn inch. His grizzled face hardened with coiled intensity as he laid out his audacious plan. We hit them first. Hard and fast, right where it hurts. Their main shipyards. Gut their reinforcements before they're battle-ready. The admirals exchanged uneasy glances. On paper, it was a suicide mission. A handful of human ships against one of the most heavily fortified installations in the galaxy. The price of failure was too hideous to contemplate. But Billy's purpose was unshakable, and his track record spoke for itself. He'd pulled off the impossible at Outpost Zulu. If any man could spearhead this operation, it was him. After hours of heated debate, the brass grudgingly greenlit the mission. Operation Forgebreaker was a go. A week later, Billy stepped onto the bridge of the UES Dauntless, humanity's most advanced stealth warship. Sleek and predatory, she was the bleeding edge in cloak tech and silent running, designed to infiltrate and strike high-value targets with impunity. As Billy slid into the command chair, he took stock of his hand-picked crew. Ace pilots, battle-hardened Marines, and grizzled Spec Ops vets, each one the best of the best. They knew the odds, and grimly accepted them. This was a mission from which many would not return. But there was one other crucial asset on board, one that Billy knew would be the key to mission success, the same AI that had helped him slay Orin and scuttle the Brunali invaders. He nodded to the glowing hologram that coalesced over the ops console. Welcome aboard, partner. Time to finish what we started. With an acoustic thrum of engines, the Dauntless cleaved through the void toward the heart of Brunali space. Billy knew the road ahead would be harrowing. Even with their cloak, evading the enemy's sensor nets and patrols would be a constant deadly game of cat and mouse. The slightest mistake could spell disaster. For days, they threaded through the treacherous territory, narrowly slipping past Brunali formations, with only cold sweat and sizzling nerves to show for it. Billy's knuckles were white on the armrests as he willed the ship's revolutionary stealth systems to hold. Finally, after a series of heart-stopping close calls, they reached the target system, a harsh, ringed world dripping with orbital guns and tethered defense platforms. Scans showed immense fleets of half-finished Brunali warships suspended in construction cradles, row after row of invasion barges, battle cruisers, and dreadnoughts in various stages of assembly. A single facility pumping out enough firepower to crush 100 systems. It had to burn. But as he stared at the immensity of the fortified stronghold, even Billy felt an uncharacteristic twinge of despair. The station's defenses were as fearsome as intel had warned. Assault from any angle promised a blistering firestorm of flak and plasma. They needed an edge, a crack in the enemy's armor to exploit. Ordering the Dauntless to skirt the outer comms buoys, Billy authorized a dangerous close-orbit recon pattern. As they flitted between the churning rings, Powerful scopes and sensors probed the installation for any chink in its armored shell. What they found made Billy's blood boil. Long-range enhancement showed haggard human figures in ragged prison fatigues, toiling under the lash of Brunali overseers. Emaciated men and women, condemned to the void's harsh embrace as they slaved to manufacture the very ships that would subjugate their species. From the Dauntless's bridge, Billy could only watch in mounting rage as his people suffered untold depravities to sate the enemy's twisted will. Then a sudden ping from comms broke the crew's horrified silence. An incoming transmission from the shipyards, garbled but insistent. Billy feverishly ordered the signal boosted and clarified. The face that sputtered onto the view screen drove a gasp from Billy's lungs. Colonel Rhodes, his old CO from the Karen campaign. The man who'd saved Billy's life a dozen times over, whose commendations graced every officer's wish list. Now a prisoner, a slave. "Bill, that you, Sarge?" Rhodes's transmission crackled, his visage wavering. "If you're hearing this, found a way to tap their comms. Not much time." Between bursts of static, Rhodes rattled off a desperate stream of intel, guard shift patterns, network access codes, structural weaknesses in the station's superstructure, and the jackpot, a specific window where the facility's shields would be lowered for maintenance, leaving it vulnerable to incursion. As the screen bled to black, Billy clenched his fists in cold fury, the faces of his tortured brethren flashing across his mind's eye. This barbarism could not stand. Would not. He would liberate his people and rain hell on their captors in the process. Charging into the CIC, Billy barked out a flurry of orders, galvanizing his crew to action. This was no longer just a mission of strategic necessity. It was now a crusade of vengeance and retribution. 50 scarred and shadowed moons slowly cycled across their cratered faces. Then, at the appointed hour, all hell broke loose. As the shipyard's shields sputtered and died, the Dauntless shimmered into detectability, disgorging a phalanx of stealth-suited Marines who burned toward hull breaches with lethal purpose. The Brunali never saw them coming. Billy's commandos struck with ruthless precision, flow-walking through pressure doors to slam demolition charges on power nodes and life support junctures. Confusion reigned across the station as environment alarms wailed and choking coolant billowed from ruptured conduits. Then a second wave hit, this time from within, as Rhodes and his fellow captives rose up against their keepers. The oppressed became the avengers as they fell upon the Brunali in a savage human wave, armed with shanghaied weapons and pure howling defiance. And at the center of the conflagration was the Dauntless itself, a rapier amidst the chaos as it soared and banked, missile pods ripple-firing in blistering sequence. Brunali interceptors boiled from launch bays in frantic response, only to be scythed from the void by precisely calibrated point defense. Billy's eyes danced as he orchestrated the mayhem from the command deck. Structural collapse warnings pinged from all sectors. Entire city-sized modules tumbled away, venting flame and molten metal. The shipyards shuddered and buckled as a plague of secondary explosions ripped through its innards. The nebulous swirling gases churned around the Dauntless, casting eerie shadows across her battle-scarred hull. Billy stood at the viewport, his eyes scanning the void for any sign of the Earth fleet. The crew, exhausted from their daring raid on the Brunali shipyards, manned their stations with grim vigilance. Suddenly, the tactical officer's voice cut through the tense silence. "Sir, multiple contacts emerging from warp." Billy spun towards the main display. His blood ran cold as he saw dozens of Brunali warships materializing around them, their weapon ports glowing with malevolent energy. "It's a trap," he breathed. "Battle stations, shields up." The Dauntless's engines roared to life, but it was too late. The first salvo slammed into them before their defenses could fully engage. The ship bucked violently, throwing crew members to the deck. "Shields at 30% and falling," the tactical officer shouted over the screech of tearing metal. "Cloaking systems offline." Billy gripped the command chair, his mind racing. They were hopelessly outgunned. He knew what had to be done. "All hands abandon ship," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. Get to the escape pods! Now! As his crew scrambled to evacuate, Billy remained at his post. He furiously worked the controls, deploying every countermeasure in the Dauntless's arsenal to buy precious seconds. What are you doing? The AI's avatar flickered to life beside him. The ship is lost. You must evacuate. Billy shook his head. Someone has to cover their escape. It's been an honor serving with you. He activated the ship-wide comms one last time. This is Captain William Anders. To any Earth forces who receive this transmission, the Brunali are coming. Their main fleet will reach our borders within weeks. You must prepare. You must fight. Humanity's survival depends on it. With trembling hands, Billy set a collision course for the nearest Brunali dreadnought. The Dauntless surged forward, her engines screaming in protest. Billy, the AI's voice was uncharacteristically soft. I don't want you to die. He managed a small smile. Take care of them for me. Make sure Earth gets the intel. The dreadnought loomed larger in the view screen. Billy closed his eyes, picturing the faces of those he fought to protect. The impact was catastrophic. The Dauntless tore through the Brunali ship's hull like a celestial spear. For a moment, it seemed they might pierce clean through. Then the warp core breached. From their escape pods, the Dauntless crew watched in horror as both ships vanished in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave battered their tiny vessels, sending them tumbling into the void. Days passed. The survivors drifted in eerie silence, their supplies dwindling. When rescue finally came, many were too numb to feel relief. During debriefing, the awful truth emerged. It hadn't been a chance encounter. The Brunali had orchestrated the entire ambush. Earth's leaders listened in grim silence to Billy's final message, the weight of impending doom settling over them. Colonel Rhodes, once a pillar of strength, sat motionless in his quarters. His eyes were vacant, haunted by memories of Brunali torture and Billy's sacrifice. He saved us, Rhodes whispered to no one. And now we're all doomed. Across human space, the news spread like wildfire. Panic gripped some worlds, their inhabitants fleeing to distant colonies. On Earth, military recruiters were overwhelmed as volunteers lined up to join the defense forces. In a secure facility, technicians worked feverishly to extract every scrap of data from Billy's AI companion. It was more than tactics and intel. It was the essence of a hero, a beacon of hope in humanity's darkest hour. As the Brunali war machine ground inexorably towards Earth, Billy's last words echoed through the hearts and minds of those who heard them. If that's how they want to play it, it wasn't just a threat. It was a promise, a rallying cry for a species with its back against the wall. In death, Billy had become something more than a man. He was a symbol of humanity's will to survive. The coming storm would test that will as never before. But in the crucible of Billy's sacrifice, a new perseverance was forged. Humanity would meet the Brunali tide with fire in their eyes and steel in their souls. The final battle for Earth loomed on the horizon, and Billy's spirit would be there, urging them on to victory or a glorious last stand.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.